Hello, Melissa, are you on the line?
I am.
This is Shelby. Hi, this is Shelby Shadwell.
Hi, Shelby.
Thanks. I just jumped on, and well, we're the only two here right now. We'll probably have everybody muted at the beginning, except for myself, just to let people know as we get into the call. We expect a lot of people. Okay. I think there's 30 or 40 signed up, so it's a much bigger call because it was for all volunteers.
Right.
And it's a interesting issue to learn about, so I'm pretty excited about it. But thanks for being on the call. And, we will get started shortly. I guess I'm going to get materials to Sarah Solsi as soon as possible tomorrow, and it looks like we're okay to go ahead and circulate on Saturday and make an announcement so that folks can relate it to the issue, and I'm excited about that.
Yeah, sounds great.
All right, cool. Thanks again for being on. And it looks like Melody, you just jumped on?
Yes, I did. Yes.
Hi. Thanks for being here. There's 3 of us right now, but there'll be more as we move forward. So thanks for being on the call. We expect a pretty big turnout for this one, so we'll probably have most people muted as we move forward. But I just wanted to let you know that I'm on and a couple other folks, and we'll get started shortly as other folks jump in here. I'm going to kind of act as the voice for letting people know they're getting on the call. It looks like Chris Lowry just joined. Thanks for being on the call, Chris. And we're going to get started shortly as soon as Ken gets on here and we get some more folks. So thanks again. You'll probably hear me repeat some things as people jump on. But during the call, again, we expect a larger call this time, and most people will be muted. But if you do have a question at any time, you can just press 1 on your dial pad, and that lets me know that you have a question, and we can get you queued up and unmuted so you can talk, again, since this is a larger call. Also, this call is going to be recorded just so folks that couldn't make this particular call, which is an important one, they will be able to hear it at a later date. So I just wanted to let everybody know that. And also, we will have notes from this call emailed out to everyone, and also and on our volunteer resources tab on the website. So as people jump on here, I think Ken just jumped on. I'm going to go ahead and unmute Ken since he's also a presenter here. Ken,
hi,
I was just getting. Hi. Everybody's muted except for you and I was just as people join the call, I was kind of going through the spiel as far as things go. It's a larger call. It looks like we already have 3, 6, 9, in addition to you and me, Ken, on the call. So we're keeping everybody muted for now because it is a larger call, but I wanted to remind folks you can press 1 on your dial pad, and we'll be able to see that and answer your questions that way. Also, I wanted to mention this call is being recorded since it's a very important call, and we will send out the link for that to all volunteers via email probably tomorrow or as soon as we get the link, so that folks that weren't able to join will be able to listen to this important call. Also, we will email the script that we'll go over tonight to everyone, and we'll have it available in our volunteer resources tab. So just wanted to let everybody know that as we have a couple more people joining. Everybody's muted at this point. I just want to reiterate that. Sorry for those that have been on longer and hear me repeating myself. But everybody's muted. You can always press 1 if you have a question, and we will unmute you so you can ask your question. Again, to reiterate, this call is being recorded so that folks that weren't able to jump on can hear it at a later date, and we'll email you that link. And you can spread it around. We'll email it to all volunteers so they can listen to the call after that. And we will have the notes and the script from this call that we're talking about on our volunteer resources tab, and we'll email it out to everyone as well. In addition, what was I going to say? We've got a couple more people jumping on just recently, so I'm going to go through that spiel one more time for folks that just jumped on, and then I'll hand it over to Ken and we can get started. So everybody's muted initially, but if you do have a question, press 1 on your dial pad, and we will unmute you so you can ask your question. This call is being recorded for folks that couldn't jump on the call, and we'll have a link emailed out to everyone, and you can share that around, and so that folks can listen to this call after the fact. The script we're talking about and the notes for this call are going to be emailed out as well, and they'll be available under a tab on our website called Volunteer Resources, where we already have some resources and talking points about tonight's subject, which is a limited convention of the states as authorized by Article 5 of the U.S. Constitution. So you can check those resources out, as well as hear have the script that we're discussing tonight in tonight's call. Ken, what do you think? Do you think anybody else is going to jump on, or do you want to just dive in here?
We have 14 people on the call right now, including you and me, so I think that's a pretty good group. We're a few minutes after 7, so I think we might as well go ahead and get started, and if people come on board in the middle of it, that's fine. As you said, we'll have all this information available after the fact as well. So let me just kick us off by saying that the topic for tonight is, if you're out there canvassing and you get a voter who says, oh, I can't sign this because I'm afraid of an Article 5 convention, or I'm afraid of a constitutional convention, or words to that effect, how do you respond to them? I know many of you have told me you've gotten questions like that already, and we want to talk tonight about how do you respond to those questions. First, let me say that when Shelby and Lynn and I and a few other folks on the steering committee drafted the language of the Free and Fair Elections Act, we had a long debate about whether we should ask for an Article 5 convention or not, knowing that that would be controversial for some people. And we did some research, we talked to people, we thought about it, and we concluded that the risk of a runaway Article 5 convention is pretty minimal. It's not quite zero, but it's close to zero. But the risk of Congress doing nothing is very large, so we elected to include in our petition the call for the Article 5 convention. So what we want to do tonight is just kind of do a little role play thing, where we'll model for you a conversation that you might have hypothetically with a voter who has concerns. I will play the role of the canvasser answering questions. Shelby will play the role of the questioning voter. Now, understand that Shelby is role-playing here. He doesn't actually believe. The questions that he's going to be asking are reasonable questions that reasonable people will ask you and need to have reasonable, responsible answers. So he'll play the role of the questioning voter, and I will supply some answers that you can model your own answers after. As I said, we'll have this script posted to the website shortly after the call or sometime tomorrow. So Shelby, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, I sure do. And I do want to reiterate, if anybody, we also want to address your questions in a timely manner about this issue in particular. And then at the end, if you have more general questions, we'd like to address those. Again, you're all muted, but you can press 1 on your dial pad if you do come up with a question. So I am, again, playing the role of a skeptical voter that doesn't know much. What?
An intelligent voter, a very intelligent voter who has thought about this a little bit.
Absolutely. That's mostly what you'll get. So, I see your petition here, and I see it's got. You're talking about the Constitution. How is the Constitution amended?
Well, first of all, there's Article 5 of the U.S. Constitution specifies 2 different ways to amend the Constitution. first, Congress can propose such an amendment, or second, if Congress doesn't do it, something called a convention of states can do it. Now, it's important to note that the Constitution does not have any language or says anything about a, quote, constitutional convention. The words constitutional convention do not appear anywhere in the Constitution. The Constitution instead says that Congress shall call a convention for proposing amendments if 2/3 of the states call for such a convention. When people talk about the term constitutional convention, that kind of suggests that the entire Constitution would be up for consideration at such a convention. But since that term is not in the Constitution, there's really no authority for suggesting that a convention of states would really open up the entire Constitution. Most of the time when people use the term constitutional convention, they're using it out of ignorance of the actual language of the Constitution. Although sometimes when they use that term, they're intentionally trying to scare you into thinking that that this convention would be like opening Pandora's box and anything could possibly happen.
Yeah, I've heard lots of people say that a convention of states could run away and completely change the Constitution. That's what I've heard. Where is this fear of a runaway convention coming from?
The fear is actually coming from both the left and the right. You hear that from lots of people, mostly people who are opposing some amendment for some reason. Now, Article 5 of the U.S. Constitution does not provide any rules on how a convention is to be conducted. So opponents of various amendments over the years, this has been going on for decades, opponents of various amendments have exploited the fact that there's no rules in the Constitution to create fear and defeat whatever proposal they're against at that moment. And as I said, it could be from the left or from the right. Both sides play up to this fear. The most recent example of this fear has been attempts on the right to pass a balanced budget amendment. Many left-leaning groups like Common Cause have then ginned up fears of a runaway convention in an effort to scare state legislators into not joining the call for a convention. Now, that effort to gin up fear has been very successful in many states, including Wyoming, for quite a long time until just this last session. I'll get to that in a little bit. But the most important thing to remember is that even if a convention did run away, anything it proposed would still have to be ratified by 3/4 of the states, or 38 states. So the ratification process is the ultimate check on a convention's power.
Well, that makes sense, but I think this convention might possibly run away. What do you think about that?
I think it's extremely unlikely that a convention would run away. We've never had a national convention under Article 5, so we don't have any experience at the national level, and that's kind of why this fear sounds plausible to people. It's new and different and scary, and therefore when people say it could run away, we have no direct evidence to the contrary. But we do have some indirect evidence. For example, many state constitutions have similar kinds of provisions where if you want to amend a state constitution, the state calls a convention in the state to amend the Constitution. That's been done hundreds of times over the last centuries. It's done hundreds of times around the country. None of those state conventions have ever run away. It's never happened. We have another analog also at the national level, and that is the Electoral College. It's a kind of a convention, and delegates are selected, and they are supposed to do one thing, vote for a particular person, and there have been suggestions that the Electoral College could run away and disregard the voters, and that's never happened. Even in this last cycle, only a couple of people actually were what they call the unfaithful delegates. Almost every delegate did what they were instructed to do, and the Electoral College has never run away. So I think that the likelihood of this for runaway is extremely small.
Well, you just said that Article 5 has no rules for how this convention would be conducted. Doesn't that mean it could write its own rules and do whatever it wants?
That's a very common misconception. The fact that Article 5 does not provide rules does not mean there are no rules. You just have to look for rules in other places. And there's plenty of places where you can find rules that would be used to control how a convention would be run. The most important rule would be the Due Process Clause of the 5th and 14th Amendments. Now, due process is lawyer terms. It's kind of a nebulous concept, although when you think about it, almost everything in the Constitution is kind of nebulous and needs to be interpreted by the courts. But the key aspect of due process is notice and an opportunity to be heard. If 34 states called for a convention to do one thing, and the convention decided to do something else, the legislators and voters who called for the convention would not have their voices being heard. It would be a violation of due process. Another outside rule that would limit a convention is the simple law of agency. That's a very basic law, common law concept, uniform, I think, in all 50 states. Basically, it says that if somebody who is what they call the master, the boss, delegates authority to a servant, the servant can only do what was delegated to it by the master. So, for example, if any person would appoint somebody else to be his agent, the agent is limited to that one thing. So, for example, Shelby, let's say I gave you $15 and asked you to go to the store and buy me a carton of cigarettes. If you returned driving a brand new Ferrari, handed me the keys, and you say, here you go, I bought this new Ferrari for you, you've exceeded the authority I gave you. I don't own that Ferrari, and I can't be made to pay for it because you exceeded your authority. Very similar to our situation. When the legislature or the voters of a state appoint delegates to a convention and delegate to them the power to do one thing, for example, vote on an amendment declaring that only human beings have political rights, the delegates have no authority to go beyond that delegated authority and do anything else. You there, Shelby? Is Shelby still on? I can't hear you, Shelby. Shelby, you're muted. Okay. All right. Well, we seem to have lost Shelby. So let me continue on. The next question that Shelby is supposed to ask me is, okay, but who chooses which rules to follow? Maybe I'm muted. Can people hear me? Am I still here? It looks like my microphone is. Somebody raise your hand if you can still hear me. Okay, yeah, you can hear me. Good. All right, so I'll continue on, and we'll see if Shelby can jump back in here. So the question is, who chooses which rules to follow at the convention? That's a great question, and I don't think anybody has a definitive answer for it. Most likely, though, it'd be Congress, because Article 5 says that when 2/3 of the states demand, Congress shall call for the convention. So it seems likely that Congress, when it calls a convention, would probably specify some rules. And Congress would also almost certainly limit the call to the topic, that 2/3 of the states have specified. So in our situation, Congress would likely say the convention may only address the situation of political rights of corporations. Shelby, are you back yet? Okay, I'm not hearing Shelby. So the next question that Shelby is supposed to ask, but Congress is currently controlled by Republicans. Couldn't they create rules that allowed for a runaway convention? I think that's very unlikely. Many Republicans are just as afraid of a runaway convention as the Democrats are. And recent history, including the town hall meetings regarding health care reform and the Affordable Care Act, show that many Republicans do listen to their constituents. But ultimately, I think that if Congress issued a call for convention that was too broad or exceeded the calls for a limited convention made by 2/3 of the states, lawsuits would be filed and resolved in favor of those who would insist on limiting the convention to the authorized subjects. So, like I said before, the Due Process Clause, the laws of agency, and other rules that I mentioned before would seem to give courts the power to step in and stop a runaway convention before it got rolling. And by the way, that's not just me talking. Many scholars have studied this and agree that a convention could be limited and that the courts would have the power to prevent a runaway. The most persuasive treatment of this to me was an opinion by Attorney General Edwin Meese in 1987 that thoroughly examined the issue and reached those conclusions. That is, that a convention call could be limited and could be stopped by a court if it tried to run away. You can find that Attorney General opinion on the Volunteer Resources tab of our website. I also want to note that there are proposals in Congress right now to create rules for how a convention to propose amendments would be called and conducted. Both Attorney General opinions from 1987 and many scholars have suggested that it would be a good idea to have such rules in place before any call reaches the critical mass of 34 states. Now, given how dysfunctional Congress is at the moment, I don't have a great deal of confidence that Congress will adopt any such rules in the near future, but we can always hope, and we should always be aware of the fact that those proposals are moving through Congress. Okay, and one more time, is Shelby back on the line yet?
Am I back on the line, Ken?
Okay, got you there. I hear you now.
Okay, great. Sorry, for some reason I got kicked off there, and I rejoined the call and was still muted. But it looks like me as an intelligent but partially skeptical voter, I'm back on the call.
Okay, good. So we just finished question number 6. What else do you have for me?
Oh, yeah. Well, all that seems to make sense, but can states impose any rules on this convention?
That's a great question. It's probably not possible for any individual state to impose rules that govern the entire convention, but individual states can impose rules on their own delegates to such a convention. And that's happening right now, including right here in Wyoming. Now remember I said earlier that Wyoming had resisted the call for an Article 5 convention of states to propose a balanced budget amendment. And that had been happening for many sessions prior to the current session. You and I, Shelby, we saw this directly last January when we testified before the House Corporations Committee in favor of the Free and Fair Elections Resolution, the predecessor to the act that we're now circulating petitions for. We tried to get that through the Corporations Committee, and a number of people testified at the Corporations Committee in favor of our petition, of this bill. I testified, you testified, lots of people testified. Every person who testified was asked by the committee if the joint resolution called for an Article 5 convention. Every one of us said no, it did not. And the petition that we submitted to the legislature did not have the Article 5 call in it because we knew that it would never go anywhere had we put that in there. But despite the fact that all of us reassured the committee that our bill did not call for an Article 5 convention, the committee still adopted an amendment to it specifying that the joint resolution could never be interpreted as a call for an Article 5 convention. It was very clear to us that the legislators, the members of that committee, were terrified of an Article 5 convention. But later in that session, the legislature did, in fact, adopt a resolution calling for an Article 5 convention of states to propose a balanced budget amendment. That's the same amendment that they had rejected many times before. This year, they passed it. What happened? Why did they do that? Well, the answer is during the same session, the legislature adopted a statute which has been signed by the governor and is now the law of Wyoming, which strictly governs how delegates to an Article 5 convention would be appointed. And this is important. That same bill strictly limits the power of those delegates to vote on anything. Specifically, that new statute adopted this past session says that the Wyoming delegates to any Article 5 convention are only allowed to vote on, quote, authorized amendments. And that's defined to mean amendments that are within the call for a limited convention. So if the call is for a limited convention to only address balanced budget amendments, they can only vote on amendments talking about balanced budget amendments. If we're successful and we have a call for amendments to deal with money in politics and Citizens United, only that topic could be voted on by the Wyoming delegation. If a delegate from Wyoming voted on an unauthorized amendment, several things happen. First, their vote would not be counted at the convention, so you can't do it. B, that delegate could be removed from the delegation. And third, the delegate, and this is crazy, the delegate could actually be charged with a felony, punished by up to 5 years in prison for having cast that vote on an unauthorized amendment. So, if an Article 5 limited convention tried to run away, the Wyoming delegation ain't running with it because they could go to jail for doing that. Now, I know that a similar bill has been approved already in Indiana. Several other states, I think including Wisconsin, are considering these bills. So there are states now who are terrified of runaway conventions are taking steps to make sure that their delegations would not join such a runaway. Wyoming is one of those states that has already adopted that.
Well, Ken, that's all well and good. You know, I just have this kind of gut feeling, and there just seem to be so many things that still need to be worked out, and I'm just still kind of afraid of this whole convention of states thing.
That's understandable. It's new. We've never had a convention like this in the history of our country, so it's understandable that it's kind of unsettling. There are many unknowns, but there's one thing we do know for sure. If we do nothing, nothing changes, which means that the already horrible situation involved with money in politics and representatives being controlled by money and not by us, that will only get worse. So doing nothing is not an option for us. So that means we have to amend the Constitution. We can have to ask Congress to do it, or we can take matters into our own hands. Relying on Congress to propose the amendment is also not a very good solution. Theoretically, Congress can do it, but since it is the entity most addicted to money in politics, I don't really trust Congress to propose this amendment. Article 5, Convention of States, was put into the Constitution for exactly this situation, where Congress is the problem, or it won't act. The people will have a way to take matters away from Congress and do things directly. That's what we're doing right now, and this issue calls for such direct action by the people. The risk to our democracy from money in politics is manifest. We must correct it. The risk of an Article 5 convention misbehaving is vanishingly small. The risk of Congress doing nothing to correct the problem is very large. That is why Wyoming Promise strongly advocates for an Article 5 Convention of States solution. Article 5 the convention is not a perfect solution because of the various unknowns we just discussed. But let's not let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Article 5 is a very good solution. As we are fond of saying at Wyoming Promise, we don't act out of fear. We lead with courage.
All right, so that brings us kind of to the end of this particular script. We do have a hand up, and I want to address a first question because we are at a sort of a question and answer portion of this. I'm going to go to Jana Weber. I'm unmuting you now.
Oh, I didn't really mean to push the button. I'm doing okay. Thank you. That was a very good script.
Okay, excellent. So I'm muting you again. Ken, do you have anything to add in addition to that, or should we just open it up for questions and discussion?
No, I think I've said everything we need to say. The next thing on my list here was open for questions. So let's see if people have questions or comments or discussion. Please press 1 on your keypad, raise your hand, and looks like Sarah has raised her hand. So Sarah, take it away. Shelby,
hi,
unmute her.
This is Lorraine Salino-Klein, and I've been giving that little flyer out for people to get on the website, and they're telling me they can sign on the website. Is that correct?
No, they cannot.
Yeah, that's what I thought. But why? So is there something to sign on the website that they're making them think that they already signed this?
No,
okay.
We just put on the website a new tab called Where to Sign or Where to Sign, and the very first thing it says under that tab is you cannot sign online. You must find a circulator with a hard copy piece of paper to sign. So
well,
that's.
I don't know what people are doing, but I'll go back to those people and get them to sign my hard copy.
Okay,
Thank
good.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, who else?
Other questions or concerns about this? Or and we can open up to more general volunteer issues as well. If it's not about our
kind of questions. Okay, Sarah again.
Okay, Sarah, you're unmuted.
Okay, this is Mary Beth Steffens, and I'm late as usual, so I don't know if this has been already covered. But I have a friend in Laramie County in Cheyenne who would like to get signatures. Is there anybody in Cheyenne, or is there a store or someplace where people can go and sign the petition?
Yes, we have a team going in Cheyenne. They're not as well organized as we are in Albany County, but there's 5 or 6 different people who have petitions. And why don't you send an email to either me or Shelby with the name of the person who wants to sign, and we can forward that on to the team leader there or one of the other circulators, and we'll make sure that they make contact with each other. We're still working on getting more people going there, but it's been a little slow going in Cheyenne.
And let me just add, this is Shelby. I'll just add. Go ahead.
She's willing to take a petition, but she doesn't think she can get it full of 100 signatures. But what she was hoping is that there would be a business or some place, central place, that she could send people to sign.
Absolutely. Handle that?
Yeah. So in addition to that this is also the reason why we put a Where to Sign tab up on the WyomingPromise.org website. And I've sent out an email to all county team leaders about this. We're going to set up email accounts for each county so that when you go to the Where to Sign tab, it gives you an email address that you can send your email to in your county or a close county. Where can I get a hold of this petition? So county team leaders can direct you to a petition. We've had a couple of folks just because we've had a lot of people emailing us at info@wyomingpromise.org, which is great, but they're like, where do I sign? And they've been doing that for a while, so that's why we put up that tab. In addition, under that Where to Sign tab, we're going to have basically businesses that where you can go and sign a petition. We already have that for Albany County right now. That's the only one that's really gotten back to me. But if team leaders in each county go in and check your email, I sent out a reminder today about it. The first email I sent was before the eclipse, and I'm guessing some folks were a little busy. So I sent out a reminder today to set up a free email account and to so that county team leaders could check that and know folks, people that want to sign in their county have emailed them basically saying, where can I sign? Or having the businesses on that under the tab for each county. So if you check wyomingpromise.org and go where to sign, that's going to be kind of a one-stop shop for knowing where to sign in your county and get in touch with team leadership. Is that about right, Ken?
Yeah, that sounds right.
Excellent.
Okay, it looks like we have Melissa's hand is up.
Yes, so I'm unmuting. No? Yeah.
I just wanted to comment that the part about anything that was decided at a constitutional convention would have to get the 3/4 of the states. That is not something I had thought about before, so that was a really interesting way to look at it and an argument in favor of not being scared of it.
Right. Yeah, people. I've seen. I'm on a couple of national listservs, and people who should know better. The one national listserv that American Promise runs has a lot of people who are very smart about this and who are working on the same issue around the state. And one person on that listserv just posted something that said, you can't have a convention of states because anything the convention does becomes part of the Constitution and we're all screwed. It's the end of the republic. No, it's not, because you have to have 3/4 of the states approve it. And so there's a lot of misinformation out there, even among smart people. So you will get questions about this, and we have to be respectful of people's opinions. They've been told this for years. They've been told this by people they trust. Common Cause, for example, has been all over this saying you cannot have a convention that's too dangerous. I completely disagree with Common Cause. I used to respect Common Cause. I'm losing my respect for them because they're so adamant about we can't have a convention of states. And they're using the term Constitutional Convention, again, trying to scare us. That's not the term that's in the Constitution at all.
And if I can just add to that, this is Shelby, I'll add one more thing about that in particular. You know, the check on any amendment coming out of convention is, again, it has to be ratified by 3/4 of the states. I've had people in the past ask me, well, what if they just change the rules and say any amendment, it only takes, 1/3 of the states, to ratify it? Well, no, that's not constitutional. They would have to have a constitutional amendment that's ratified by 3/4 of the states saying that only 1/3 of the states have to be able to ratify it. So the bar is 3/4 of the states no matter what. And that's why no amendment, no crazy amendment can ever get added to the Constitution. Our Constitution is extremely hard to amend. It's one of the hardest constitutions to amend in the world. And so the framers knew this, and they put a check on it, and a pretty hefty check. And I'll also say that the framers were geniuses to put in the conventions of the states clause in there and have the Convention of States be part of Article 5, because they said, hey, one of these days Congress is going to get so corrupt that they're going to stop listening to the people on this issue or another issue. And the framers knew that. They anticipated that, and that's why they were geniuses. And they said, so we're going to have this other method. I will say that half of all of our 27 amendments have started with Article 5 Convention of States calls, including the Bill of Rights. The 17th Amendment got the closest to calling for a Convention of States, and that also had to do with an issue of corruption. It used to be we couldn't directly elect our senators. They were appointed by state legislators in smoke-filled rooms with bags of cash going back and forth. And people knew that, and they said, hey, this is corruption, and we need to directly elect our senators. And so they got within one or two states of calling for a convention for direct election of senators when the Congress at the national level proposed the amendment and said, hey, we're going to have direct election of senators, because they didn't want, a convention of people outside Congress writing it. So it's a great tool of leverage, if nothing else.
Yeah, I don't see any other hands up right now, so let me just add my comments to what Shelby just said. He's exactly right. Congress does not want Congress likes to be in control of things, and when they see that they're about to lose control, they'll jump in front of the train. We've got to get the train moving, though, and the train is moving. And I do believe that ultimately what's likely to happen is when we get enough states on board saying we need a convention of states, that will be what kicks Congress in to get going. There are several bills pending right now in Congress. There were in the last Congress. People are trying this through the congressional route, but they never get anywhere, so we need to keep the pressure on.
And this is a great way of keeping the pressure on specifically. I will say, so just for your knowledge nationwide, American Promise has 19 states that have asked Congress to do this officially, either through the legislature or through ballot initiative. 5 states have called for the Article 5 route. That is Vermont, New Jersey, California, Illinois, and Rhode Island. And so 5 states on board in 7 years. And if you look at the timeline for amendments, that's not a bad thing. And so we want to make Wyoming be the 6th state of that, but also the 20th state because we also asked Congress to do it. And it's all about leverage, and the more leverage we can put on them, the better. Ken, do you just want to mention what they're doing in Massachusetts that you mentioned to me yesterday?
Yeah, I was gonna jump in and say that. In Massachusetts is one of the 19 states that has called on Congress to propose the amendment, and that was done. Actually, it was done twice. So Massachusetts legislature has twice called on Congress to propose this kind of amendment. But there's a bunch of activists there who say that the bills that went through the Massachusetts legislature weren't quite to their liking. So Massachusetts is right now got a group like ours, like Wyoming Promise, that's working to get on the Massachusetts ballot an initiative that specifically calls for an Article 5 convention of states, because they don't think that the call on Congress is enough. They're trying to go the extra step through a ballot initiative in Massachusetts. So there's at least 2 states, Wyoming and Massachusetts, that are now working on ballot initiatives that would call for an Article 5 convention. So Sarah's got your hand up again.
Yeah, and I think Sarah might be with a few folks there if they're meeting together. So it might not just be Sarah, but anyway, you're on.
Hi, my name is Barry Heaney, and I have been working out of Casper. And I have a few questions. I've got some signatures, and people were asking me about the definition of soft money, and there's a 501c3 and a 501c4, and they were saying to me that some of this money, that it has to, the donor has to be known, and there's other dark money where the donor is unknown.
Right.
Could you clarify that?
Sure. Yes. So 501c3 is technically not supposed to be making political contributions of any sort. 501c3s are charitable organizations that are barred from political activity. So they're not the problem. 501c4s are the problem. 501c4s are called service organizations. They're supposed to be advancing some public service kind of mission. They are allowed to make contributions, especially since Citizens United now removed the bar on corporate donations to candidates. 501c4s are corporations, and because they are corporations, they do not need to disclose who their donors are, their sources of income. That's where we get super PACs. A super PAC is a 501c4 corporation that receives donations from anonymous donors, and sometimes hundreds of millions of dollars of that money, and the super PAC then can spend it on any kind of political ad that they want, usually negative ads, but it could be doing whatever they want with that money. And we don't know where the money comes from, because we know that this 501c4 spent the money, but who funded them, we don't know. And that's the heart of the problem of dark money.
I didn't.
I have a further question.
Okay.
How is in a presidential campaign they can run up costs of $1 billion? How are we going to fund that $1 billion? Are we going to do it with government money, or only individuals are going to contribute? I'm not sure what it's going to look like after we get our amendment passed.
Right, and nobody can tell you what it's going to look like, because the amendment only creates conditions that allow us to make these kinds of reforms. What the actual reforms look like is up to a future Congress or state legislatures or whoever is going to create these new rules. But we can't create any new rules, because Citizens United says basically there are no rules in terms of who can spend money, and unlimited amounts of money can be poured into the into politics by corporations and wealthy individuals, and until we get that rule overturned and get to a spot where we have the power to create campaign finance reform, we can't begin to do it. So if we get our amendment passed, that gives Congress and state legislatures the power to enact meaningful campaign finance reform, but what that looks like is up to that legislative body. So, this is a long process. We get the amendment done, and then we have to go back to work to talk to our legislators and say, here's what we want. We want to, and there'll be a big debate among lots of people about what it should look like at that point, and our voices will still be heard, and we'll still have work to do at that point to get the kind of campaign finance reform that we really need.
And let me just add to that. This is Shelby. Because of Citizens United, Montana had 100 centuries worth of anti-corruption political legislation overturned. They had rules in Montana, laws on the books against campaign finance that the state wanted. So it was a states' rights thing, but the Citizens United overturned the states' rights of Montana to have those anti-corruption laws. And they'd been on the books for 100 years. When railroad barons would come in and try to buy up the legislature and stuff like that. So they passed laws against that, and Citizens United overturned it. And so right now, if we were to do any laws in the state of Wyoming to say, well, Wyoming cannot pass, we need some campaign finance regulation in Wyoming, it could also get overturned by Citizens United. It could go up to the Supreme Court and they could overturn it, or it would get overturned much earlier. So we're just asking that we as a state and as a nation can regulate campaign spending, because right now we can't under Citizens United.
Okay, are there any other questions? Comments? Okay, I'm not seeing any other hands up. Sarah, or whoever's on that line, one more time.
Yeah, I'll unmute Sarah now.
When this is Mary Beth Stephens again, and when I went to the state fair in Douglas, I had a fellow ask me about unintended consequences of this sort of amendment. Can you think of a solid response to that sort of question? Because he was afraid we would make it worse.
Make money in politics worse. I'm not sure how that's possible at the moment.
Yeah,
well, right now the rule is there are no rules, and money is unlimited and can overwhelm everything. So I can't see how it could possibly get worse. Unintended consequences. One of the unintended consequences arguments that I've heard is that corporations they're useful things, and they help us raise money, and if we start depriving them of constitutional rights, that's a slippery slope, and we can destroy a tool that has a very useful economic value in helping us order our economic lives. that's an unintended consequence that people have raised to me. I don't think that's the case because we're not asking for corporations to be abolished. We're not asking for corporations to lose all kinds of corporate power. We're asking for simply a declaration that human beings have political rights that corporations don't share. It's a very limited kind of amendment. We're going to keep corporations around to do everything that they do and do very well and do effectively. They're tools that are well designed for certain things. They are not tools designed for speaking or for political speaking. And that's all we're trying to do. So this is a limited amendment that's targeting a very direct and very sharp problem, but it's not, corporations are not inherently evil. It's just when they are used to drown out the voices of multitudes, millions of voters, that's when they become a problem. Does that answer your question?
Yes. So then basically, the bottom line is that we are working toward campaign finance reform.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
And we can't do it until we get this amendment. It's going to be overturned by the courts. Any legislation that's passed trying to regulate campaign finance spending. McCain-Feingold was overturned because of Citizens United in particular. So that's ultimately what we're going for: reasonable limits on this issue.
Okay.
And it looks like Jean Brown, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, you had your hand up. You're unmuted.
Hi. Yes. I was just wondering how the effort is going. What is a progress report?
Absolutely. Ken, do you want to speak on that?
Our progress is spotty. In some places, Albany County, Sublette County, Sweetwater County, we're doing great. We have efforts going in a number of other counties that are not quite as well organized as those three counties in particular. So in those counties, we're right on target. We're doing very well. And in a few other counties, we're bumping along. We need to pick it up in a couple of places. We need to pick it up primarily in Cheyenne, but also Casper is starting to come online pretty well too. So Casper is starting to get going, and that's a good thing. I think Casper got a little bit distracted with the eclipse, so nobody was focusing on this issue so much, but I don't blame them because that was a cool thing. But I think Casper is going along now. But we still need teams in Teton County particularly, and some of the western counties need to pick it up a little bit. So, and that's pretty much what I do full time now is I bounce around the state talking to people, trying to get them on board to get teams going around. I think we have more numbers than we know about because we need to. A lot of people have petitions, and I'll tell you, if you have a petition in your hands that you have not shown to your county data manager, the names you have on your petition aren't in our database yet. And we're hoping to start in the next couple of weeks, doing some door-to-door canvassing, but we want to make sure that every person who has signed it already is in our database as having signed, so we don't have to go knock on their door and bother them a second time. So if you have a petition that has signatures and you have not yet shared those names with your county data manager, talk to your county team leader, figure out how to get that to your data manager so they can enter those names and then give the petition right back to you so you can keep on circulating that same petition.
So I have a question about petitions too. Am I still unmuted? Okay.
Yes.
I heard earlier in the conversation someone said that they didn't want to take on the role of collecting, or whatever that word is, signatures because they wouldn't get 100. And I didn't think that so much mattered. Does it?
Well, you don't have to fill it up, but there's a practical problem here, and that is the Secretary of State printed all the petitions. Those of you who have petitions, those were printed by the Secretary of State. We paid for it, but It's an official form printed by the Secretary of State. They gave us enough to get 78,000 signatures. We need 38,000 signatures.
Okay.
And if we start getting petitions that are less than half filled, we're not going to have enough petitions to get our 38,000. Okay. So we'd like to have them as full as possible. We actually we're shooting for more than 38,000. We're shooting for, if we can get 60,000, we'd be happy. 50,000 might be doable, but we want to get 50 to 60,000 signatures because we expect that some signatures will be invalidated because the person's moved or they signed their name wrong or put a P.O. box or whatever. We'll lose some signatures. We know that. So we need to have at least half of the petitions filled up before they're turned in, and hopefully completely filled in.
Okay. And I only ask that question to make sure people know that if they, for whatever reason, they can't finish getting to 100, the signatures are all still valid, and they need to be handed in. Yeah. Yes,
of course. Of course.
Well, you say that, but.
Okay. Yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right.
Thanks
Are there any other questions?
If not, Ken, do you have any closing remarks or comments?
No, other than just keep it up, people. We're doing this is a heavy lift. It's not easy to get this on the ballot, but I think it's really important that we do because the choice of doing nothing is that we get nothing done and nothing changes, and we have to change this or else we really will lose our democracy. And a hand just did go up, Melody in Cheyenne.
I'm going to unmute Melody right now.
Okay.
Melody,
yeah, I'm sorry. I'm here. I have comments. Number one, I wanted to talk to you two about the meeting for the 14th in Cheyenne Library. You have competition. We're going to, I guess it has been planned that you will have the meeting in the Sunflower at, I think it's 6:30, 7:30, something like that. You have competition in another room. There is another forum on health care with the League of Women Voters. And so I'm going, well, you know, it depends if you want just us as petitioners or if you want a big population to show up. You've got competition. And they're downstairs.
Thank you for that information. Yeah. For everybody else who's on the call, Jeff Clements, who is the president of American Promise, he's the guy who is in charge of working all over the state and all over the country, is going to be in town in Wyoming, and the 14th was the day that worked out on his schedule. He's coming in from California, stopping in Wyoming, going elsewhere. So that's why we chose the 14th. It worked with his schedule. Let me get back to Jeff and see, because we had talked about maybe the 13th. I'll pass this information on to him and see if he wants to change it to the 13th. But thank you for that information. It's very, very valuable.
Yeah, thank you, Melody.
Did you
go ahead?
I did have another comment. You were talking about earlier about getting in touch with or knowing where people could go to sign the petition. Is there any way that my name or my telephone could be put there so people could just call me and I could come with my petition?
Melody, I'll address that. This is Shelby. For each county, I don't think you necessarily got this email because Matt Porras is still as the team leader in Cheyenne. But what you can do is set up you know what, I'll email you after this directly and let you know what you can do. An email account, get a free email account, and that will go on our website so that people can email that. So that you don't have necessarily your personal information on there, like your phone number. If you want your phone number on the website, we can. But we can get that up, you know, by tomorrow, so that people that check the website can be like, oh, well, I can call this number, or I can email this, and then we can have that set up immediately. So let me email you that information right after this call, and you'll know exactly what to do.
Okay, that sounds great. Okay, thank you.
Mel. Thank you. And
Chris
looks like, yeah, Jen. Chris, are you there? Hello? It might be an accidental button push. Chris, are you there?
Oh, did I push the button? Sorry.
Oh, okay. Thanks, Chris. We'll go ahead and meet you again. I just have a couple closing comments, and then we'll let you guys go, of course, because I know your time is very valuable. Check out our resources on the Volunteer Resources tab on our website. We do have not just we won't just have the script that we've got from tonight in a couple versions, but we have other Article 5 resources. The Department of Justice, the American Bar Association, the Congressional Research Service report talking about Article 5. They all say that it can be limited. And I know it's heavy reading, but ultimately they say it can be limited. But they also say, legislation from the state and national level could help clarify some of these issues for folks that are skeptical about an Article 5 limited convention of the states. So check those resources out. Share them with people that are intelligent but skeptical on this. And keep in touch with us. Feel free to keep in touch with us anytime. We will be sending an email tomorrow with a link to this recorded call, as well as the script of this. So just let us know if you guys need anything at any time. So thank you all for joining us. Ken, any last things to add?
No, other than thank you all for all your efforts. This is a big team effort, and really appreciate everything you're all doing for us. We've got a long ways to go yet, but step by step, we're going to get there.
Last thing, I just remembered, we're also going to try either under where to sign tab or a more sort of private tab for county leaders. We do want to let everybody in the state know where other counties are at in terms of how are they doing. Folks in Sweetwater County today asked me that particular question. They're like, well, what's everybody else doing? Where are they at? So we're going to try to work on, in some way, having an up-to-date sort of register of where each county is at. I know it can be sometimes feel like, oh, I'm all alone in my county and I don't know what's going on in other counties, but we're going to be working on that, so stay tuned. And other than that, I would just say thank you all again. And you can hop off at this point. I'm going to hop off unless there's anything else. All the best to you.
Thank you all for being here.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.